Suicide. Just the word has a sting to it, and it's often considered taboo to talk about. Turns out that stigma may be part of the problem. Joining us in studio to talk more about that with part 2 of his series, Warning Signs, is 47 ABC's Julian Sador. Julian?
Ryan, those in the suicide prevention community say this is a topic we have to talk about more. Let more people know what resources are out there. In part 2 tonight, we'll talk about that and what warning signs people should be looking out for.
I wish I had reached out to her.
Losing someone to suicide often leads to more questions than answers. Why? What could I have done differently? For Michelle Nelson, who lost her big sister Susan, it's something she still questions even 3 years after her death, because she says there were signs. Coincidentally, she admits right before her sister's passing, she did a run dedicated to suicide prevention, but never thought to tell her sister.
So I did my run of 13.7 miles, with each mile dedicated to someone who was struggling. And then one month later is when I got the call that she took her life. And so instantly I thought, why didn't I tell her that I was doing that? Obviously, she was struggling and didn't want to burden anybody, which is what people say. Well, I'm here to say, burden people, burden them. Call them.
In fact, those in the suicide prevention field, like Donna LeFew, clinical director for Life Crisis, say talking to someone is the best tactic.
What we find, and even the research bears out, is the best thing you can do is ask the question, even if someone's been very depressed or withdrawn or isolated, have you had any thoughts of suicide? Are you thinking of killing yourself? Just that direct question. Because if they're not, they might laugh, or they might, of course not. But if they are, they're going to feel a relief, like, oh my gosh, I've had this thought, I don't feel like I can share it with anyone, I feel embarrassed by it, and someone just directly asked me that question.
The Life Crisis Center in Salisbury takes calls 24/7, 365 days a year.
Thank you for calling the Suicide Lifeline. How can I help you this morning?
LeFew explains they are there to listen to the caller and help them figure out what got them to this point.
It's really important for them to feel understood. And so that's like one of the most critical things we do, is that a caller should feel like someone on the other end understood them and cares about them.
Well-known suicide survivor Kevin Hines, who tried to take his life by jumping off the Golden Gate Bridge, says talking to someone right before he jumped could have made him realize sooner he didn't want to do it.
At the millisecond that my hands left that rail, I had an instant regret for my actions, because the thought of suicide is separate from the action.
So we know that that's a real critical piece of what we do.
Ron Pilling with the Jesse Klump Suicide Prevention Program says that's why they teach people to be on the lookout for risk factors. Things like a history of mental illness, a recent loss of a job, a bad breakup.
These are all risk factors that 99 out of 100 times people deal with, but if there's a combination of those you know about, and then somebody says, can you take care of my dog Julian when I'm not able to do so any longer? Or everybody would be better off without me, or, my life is worthless and it's going nowhere and it'll never go anywhere. Then it's time to start paying careful attention.
But there are cases where no risk factors present themselves. Such was the case of Darren Green, who took his life in 1998.
He had plans for other times. He hadn't been giving things away. There was none of those classic signs.
Kelly Green, Darren's mother, began advocating for suicide prevention after her son's death, with the focus on reaching out to youth. Darren was almost 13 when he passed, and Green says it's that age group that can be the best at hiding things.
Kids think keeping secrets really important, and it is if they're talking about, I like Joey, okay, keep that secret, that's cool. I'm thinking of killing myself? No, don't keep that secret. No, I don't want to live anymore? Don't keep that secret. No. Tell somebody.
Even in Green's case, she had a very open relationship with her son.
The same child who took his own life said to me not long before that, we're so lucky that we can talk to you about anything. And I was a pretty proud mama about that. got a little puffed up, thought, good, I'm glad they know that. They can come to me about anything. But clearly, they couldn't.
The missing point, she says, could have been that they never discussed suicide.
There's a huge belief, and I may have even fallen into that category at that time, that if you mention it, it might put the thought in somebody's head. Where all the research that's been done shows that's an exact opposite.
She says if you think it could be in your child's head, talk about it. Even search their room for clues. Being mad over an invasion of privacy, better than them not being here at all.
If you're concerned, if you're worried, if you even have a thought, go and look as much as possible. You know, you're talking about how to start a conversation. Hey, listen, I was really worried about you yesterday. Are you okay?
In general, though, she believes suicide should be a thing openly discussed between parents and kids, which is why she says things like the success of Netflix's 13 Reasons Why are helpful, because it brings a touchy subject into the spotlight. The series, based on the young adult novel of the same name that centers around a high school girl who takes her own life after leaving audio recordings for the 13 people she claims contributed to her death.
The more awareness, the more transparency, the better chance of saving somebody.
And that's the key right there, awareness. Making suicide something we can talk about openly instead of something that only comes up when it happens to someone we know. Making it something we can talk about so people who are struggling with it know there's places they can turn to for help and that it's okay to do that. In addition to calling the Life Crisis Center, people can call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. There's also a bevy of resources on the Jesse Klump Suicide Prevention Program website. That's choosetolivemaryland.org. And if you need, you can even go to your local health department. The point is, there are plenty of places that you can go to get help. So please, if you know someone who needs it, or you yourself need it, please go talk to someone, because suicide shouldn't be the option. Ryan, back to you.
Powerful story. Thank you, Julian. That's 47 ABC's Julian Sador reporting for us live in the studio.